You ever look up at the night sky and just wonder, are we alone? I mean, really, truly alone in all of this vastness? It's probably one of the biggest, most mind-bending questions we can even ask. And today, we're going to dive right into the heart of that question, looking at the science behind the search for answers, all through the lens of a story about a discovery that, if it were true, would change literally everything.
And that very question is just hanging in the air at the Hat Creek Radio Observatory, this really remote place. It's spoken out of pure frustration by a young intern named Thomas Quinn. He's just staring into the silent cosmos, night after night, and finally just asks, so where the hell are they? It's such a simple question, right? But it's a question that has been bugging scientists for decades.
And that question, that's actually the key to a huge scientific mystery. It's called the Fermi paradox. And it is this massive, profound contradiction that sits right at the center of how we think about the universe.
Okay, so here's the paradox in a nutshell. On one side of the scale, you have the sheer numbers, which are just staggering. Our galaxy, the Milky Way, has something like 400 billion stars, and there are billions of other galaxies out there. The universe itself has been around for over 13 billion years. So with all that time and all that cosmic real estate, shouldn't there be civilizations everywhere? It just seems logical. And yet, on the other side of the scale, when we point our telescopes out and listen, all we hear is silence. Nothing.
But you know what? That silence, as loud as it is, hasn't stopped us from trying. There's this incredibly dedicated group of scientists who are actively trying to crack this paradox. They're pointing these giant electronic ears to the sky, just listening, hoping to catch something. Anything at all.
And this whole effort has a name, SETI. It stands for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. It's a project that kicked off way back in 1960, and it's all built on this one really hopeful idea. If there are other smart civilizations out there, they might be using radio waves to talk to each other, just like we do. So SETI's mission is to basically eavesdrop on the universe, to scan all that cosmic background noise for a single signal that just doesn't sound natural.
So you might be wondering, how do you even start to calculate the odds? Well, the founder of SETI, a guy named Frank Drake, actually came up with an equation for that. Now, the Drake equation isn't meant to spit out a perfect, precise number. Think of it more like a recipe or a framework for thinking through the problem. It takes a bunch of probabilities, things like how many stars are born each year, how many of those have planets, on how many of those life might start, and so on, and it multiplies them all together to get a rough guess of how many alien civilizations we might actually be able to talk to.
And the number he came up with, this is what gets right to the heart of the paradox. When Frank Drake first crunched the numbers himself, his conservative guess was 10,000. 10,000 civilizations capable of communication, and that's just in our galaxy alone. I mean, wow, 10,000. So it just makes the question even louder, right? If they're out there and there could be that many of them, why is it so quiet?
All right, so let's jump back to our story at Hat Creek. Our young intern, Thomas Quinn, he's actually dozed off, totally beaten down by the cosmic silence and just endless streams of meaningless data. But tonight, that silence is about to be absolutely shattered.
All of a sudden, this piercing, unrelenting alarm just rips through the quiet of the control room. Thomas jolts awake. An algorithm, one that's designed to spot anything unusual in the radio signals, has gone off. Something is out there.
Now the project director, Leonard Pinker, his first reaction isn't excitement, it's annoyance. He's not thinking aliens, he's thinking, what's broken now? Could it be a simple bug in the system? Maybe someone left their cell phone on and it's interfering with the super sensitive equipment? Honestly, these kinds of false alarms happen all the time.
But then, they run a really simple but absolutely decisive test. Leonard types in a command to move the whole array of radio telescopes to point them just a tiny bit away from their target in the sky. And instantly, the alarm stops. Dead silence. Then, he moves them back to the exact same spot, and the alarm just screams back to life. This is the moment that everything changes.
The conclusion is just inescapable. Think about it. If the signal was coming from a broken piece of equipment or a stray cell phone on the ground, moving the telescopes wouldn't make a difference. But it did. The source isn't on Earth. It's fixed to one specific point in the deep, deep cosmos. Okay, now here's where it gets really cool. While this whole scene at Hat Creek is fictional, from a novel, what makes it so gripping is that it's based on a very real and very famous scientific event, an event that is still one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the entire search for extraterrestrial life.
Let's go back in time. The date is August 15th, 1977. At Ohio State University, there's a radio telescope they nicknamed the Big Ear. And that night, as part of a SETI project, it records a total anomaly, a signal of truly staggering strength.
So a few days later, an astronomer named Jerry Aikman is doing the pretty boring job of reviewing the computer printouts from that night, and he sees this sequence of letters and numbers, 6 EQ UJ5. And to him, this wasn't just data. It represented a signal so powerful, so different from anything he had ever seen, that he just grabs a red pen, circles the data, and writes one single, perfect word in the margin. Wow.
So what was it about this signal that made him say, wow? Well, first, it lasted for exactly 72 seconds, which was the maximum amount of time the telescope could even look at one spot in the sky. Second, its intensity rose and fell in this perfect bell curve, which is exactly what you'd expect if the source was fixed in space and the Earth was rotating past it. It looked completely artificial, not natural at all. And the most maddening part of this whole thing, despite decades of searching that same patch of sky, it has never, ever been heard from again.
You see, the wow signal wasn't just some random loud noise. To scientists, it was packed with clues that made it absolutely electrifying. It was kind of like finding a message in a bottle, except the bottle was the entire universe.
And here is the most important clue of all. The signal was broadcast at a frequency of 1.42 gigahertz. Now, to you and me, that just sounds like a random number. But to an astrophysicist, that frequency is practically screaming for attention.
Why is it so special? Well, because 1.42 gigahertz happens to be the natural frequency given off by hydrogen, which is the most common element in the entire universe. So the theory goes that any intelligent species, no matter how different from us, would recognize this frequency as a kind of universal landmark. This special, quiet part of the radio spectrum even has a nickname, the water hole. It's seen as the logical, quiet spot where all the different species from across the cosmic desert might gather to talk.
And where did this amazing wow signal come from? The Big Ear telescope traced it to a spot in the sky in the constellation Sagittarius, right near a star system called Tau Sagittarii, which, by the way, is the exact same location our fictional scientists at Hat Creek pinpointed for their signal.
The wow signal just checked every single box for what scientists thought an alien signal would look like. It was on the perfect frequency, it came from a fixed point in space, and it looked completely artificial. As one of the scientists in our story yells, "This is a sign of life!"
And so, here we are decades later, left with this incredibly tantalizing mystery. The wow signal is still the best candidate we have ever found for an alien broadcast. It was this short, powerful, seemingly intelligent whisper from the stars that just vanished. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? We definitely heard a wow, but was anyone out there actually trying to say hello?